lesson 3 of chapter 2 of probability and statistics. Our topic today is histograms. Our essential outcome is that you will be able to make a histogram. And so it's a simple goal today. If we look at about all the different types of graphical analysis displays that we are talking about in this chapter, so far we have talked about pie charts, we've talked about bar graphs, we've done 7-leaf plots, and we've done dot plots. Our topic for today, though, is histograms. Alright, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so, what is a histogram, you might ask? Well, it's a definition for a histogram is that it's a visual representation of the distribution of data put into classes or groups. The height of the bar is the class count. And so if we look at this, I have a bar graph and a histogram. And for looking at them right away, they're pretty hard to tell apart. They both have bars, they've both got numbers, whatever. The difference is, in a bar graph, we're going to talk about different categories. So we've got US, we've got India, UK, New Zealand, and Japan. And notice that there are always gaps in between these. There's a space. In a bar graph, you don't put things right next to each other, you leave a space. However, in a histogram, you do put things right next to each other. And so here you can see that all of these they're touching. There's no gap in between them. And so, just like a bar graph has categories, in a histogram we have number ranges. And so we have the range 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and 21 to 25. And so what that tells me is that in the range of 1 to 5 right here, if I follow this over, I have about, let's say, 22 things in the range of 1 to 5. And so that's how a histogram works. If we look down at this graphic down below, it's talking about the number of students and what their final scores were on a final exam. And so if I look at this, if I have this middle range right here, this is the range from 70 to 80. And there are I follow this over, there's about 9 students in this range. And then if I look at this 80 to 90%, there's about 13 students in this range. And I can go through and I can do that for each one of these. Now, what this doesn't tell me is how many students got a 75% or how many students got an 89%. It just tells me the range. And so it's not as accurate as maybe some other graphical displays are. However, it's still helpful and we still use it quite often. And so let's actually make a histogram now. Here I have the percent of state residents living in poverty in the year 2007. So I've got a bunch of different states and the percentages. And so what I have to do before I can even think about making my histogram is I need to figure out what's the smallest percentage and what's the biggest percentage. So if I look through here, it looks like my smallest is New Hampshire was at 7.1. And it looks like my biggest is Mississippi at 20.6. And so, yeah, that looks accurate to me. And so what I need to be careful of is that my ranges include from 7.1 to 20.6. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, instead of starting at 7.1, let's start at 7.0. So 7.0. And let's count all the way up to, let's get up to 9.9. So this would be my first interval to 9.9. So now I would start my next interval at the next number, which would be 10.0. Sorry, it's always hard to write on here. 10.0. And that's going to go up from 10.0 to 11.0 to 12.0 and then to 12.9. Here, rewrite that 12.9. My next one is 13.0 to 13, 14, 15.9, 16.0 to 18.9. Then my last one is going to be 19.0. It's going to go up to 21.9. Maybe write that one again too. And so now that I have my intervals all set up, I then go up and I look at my chart and I start to figure out the frequency. So Alabama is 16.9. That's going to fall right in this category, in this interval right here. I'm going to cross that one off. Connecticut goes here, Delaware, and I go through and I fill in where all of these values go. So this can take a while. This is usually one of the longer parts of your graph and process. And then I worry about tallying them all up and giving myself a number at the end. And so we go through, we get it all recorded. Alright, we're getting there, third of the way down. Alright, and so now that we've got it all tallied, we figure out how many there are. There are 6 in this interval, 9, 7, 3, and 1. So now we go over to our histogram, and because we didn't start at 0, we're going to start over a little bit, and we're going to put, we're going to do our first one is going to be 7.0 to 9.9. And that's going, we need to get our y-axis needs to be able to go up all the way to 9. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Perfect. That would be our 9. 1. Go in and write those in. So our first interval, 7.0 to 9.9, needs to go up all the way to 6. So I'm going to draw that line across and just bring it down. That's my first one. And then my next interval is going to go from 10.0 to 12.9. See if I can get this to fit in there. Doesn't seem to want to write that small. Well, we're just going to pretend like you guys can read that. And this one's going to go all the way up to 9. And so when I draw this next one, what I do is, because we're touching, I just follow this line all the way up to 9. Now I draw it over, and now I draw it down. And so take the time to finish your graph. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. You can pause the video here and finish your graph. Now, remember that every graph needs a title, and so we're going to call this the percent of poverty in states. Percent of poverty in states. And then we need to label each one of our axes. And so in a histogram, we usually label the y-axis frequency. And we usually label the x-axis by the whatever it is we're measuring. We measure the percent. So there we have our histogram. Not the prettiest looking one in the world right now, but you get the gist of how to make it. And so if we think about some of the things we've talked about so far, we've talked about, this is a review of some of our old topics, bar graphs, sim and leaf plots, and histograms. What are some things that these all have in common? Well, they all graphically display data. Graphically display data. Alright, these are all talking about, they all help us see visual patterns. But what makes them all unique? Well, a bar graph is comparing categorical data. seven-leaf plot. A seven-leaf plot is just like a list. Just a list of another way to list the data. We can start to see some commonalities. A histogram measures the distribution of the data. I don't know what just happened. There we go. Sometimes my pens start to go crazy on me. There we go. And so that is when we talk about bar graphs, seven-leaf plot, histograms, some of the similarities and some of the differences. So if you remember, today's essential outcome is that you'll be able to make a histogram. I'd like you to write a summary on what you learned today and any questions that you still have. This was lesson 3 of chapter 2 of probability and statistics.